Buenas tardes, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Hola Ariane, hola Nati, Chili, María Mercedes, Verónica, Gloria. Cómo me gusta ver aparecer así muchas mujeres, muchas mujeres. Julio César, Manuel, hola Maribel, Laura. Qué rico
Hola,
tenerlos por acá,
Maribel.
verlos por acá. ¿Cómo estás? Hoy también desde el
Hola,
carro.
Maribel. Sí, estoy en el carro. Sí, por eso
No
apago el video.
importa.
Pero estoy bien.
Sí, sí, sí. Por favor, pon los ojos en la carretera y escuchan. Bueno, pues qué rico tenerlos por acá nuevamente en nuestros miércoles de liderazgo. Eh, Nosotros seguimos aquí comprometidos altamente con este tema de qué es lo que está pasando en Latinoamérica y en Norteamérica y en algunas otras partes del mundo donde la gente está sintiendo contracción, ¿no? En Latinoamérica estamos hablando del tema social, del tema político y de cómo eso está afectando el tema económico. En Estados Unidos estamos hablando del tema político, que definitivamente es de los temas que más afecta la parte social y la parte económica. Pero definitivamente después de la pandemia, donde todos creímos que iba a ser la peor parte, ahora viene la pospandemia. Y con la pospandemia nos damos cuenta que el mundo cambió, la manera de trabajar en las organizaciones cambió y nos cambió también la forma de hacer cultura organizacional y de sostener los equipos. Entonces, cuando hablamos del cambio, estamos hablando de este concepto de cambio, pero realmente cuando yo soy un líder y tengo que cuidar mi equipo, y cuando yo soy un líder y tengo que cuidar a las 3, 4, 5 o 6 personas con las que yo trabajo, que dependen de mí, o las 20 o las 200 personas que dependen de mí, siempre lo que veo es los seres humanos. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que está pasando con esos seres humanos en esos equipos? Y adicionalmente, ¿cómo logro sostener a mi equipo para que siga siendo productivo, pero para que tenga un estado de ánimo que les funcione? ¿Me estoy cortando? ¿Me están escuchando? Oh,
¿Y se escucha?
ya, ahora sí, ¿me están escuchando?
No, sí se escuchó lo que dije. Yo sí escuché.
¿Viste?
Ahora no. Ahora sí te cortaste, Mari. Ok, Mari me está diciendo que se quedó sin luz
¿Volví?
en este momento. Entonces, ¿volviste?
Sí, ya volví.
Bueno,
Gracias, Glory.
dale.
Entonces, les estaba contando de cómo hago yo como líder para sostener mi equipo. ¿Cómo hago yo para poder decirle a mi equipo, esto es lo que necesito que pase? ¿Cuáles son esas conversaciones? ¿Cuáles son esas prácticas que me pueden ayudar a que mi equipo no se sienta agobiado, a que mi equipo no se sienta desorientado y a que tengamos la posibilidad de seguir siendo productivos, de que sigamos teniendo buena vida y de que podamos seguir construyendo un futuro? Para eso invité a mi maestro, a nuestro maestro de cabecera, a Bob Dunham. Para aquellos que no lo conocen, Bob Dunham es el fundador del Instituto de Liderazgo Generativo. Es una institución que trabaja con la creación y el desarrollo de líderes humanos que generan y construyen futuros que importan, devolviéndole a las organizaciones el concepto de que el ser humano es el que construye la organización. Ingeniero de la Universidad de Stanford, filósofo, pensador, ha tenido muchos maestros en el tema de lo filosófico, el lenguaje, las emociones, el cuerpo. Adicionalmente, trae siempre su conocimiento sobre la tradición de la filosofía china y de la sabiduría china. Y todo esto nos los pone en un paquetico fácil de entender, fácil de hablar, pero adicionalmente fácil de practicar. Así que los dejo con Bob Dunham. Bob, ¿cuáles son esas 4 prácticas?
Fantastic.
¿Cuáles son esas 4 prácticas que le permiten a un líder sostener a su equipo en momentos de crisis?
Fantastic. So thank you. I'm going to ask you all, give me a high 10. Let's They got it. It was fantastic. And let's take a deep breath. I want us to feel the conversation today, because the challenge of facing change begins with the body, begins with the triggering, with the reaction. So my question to you is, what is your habitual reaction to change? One habitual reaction to change is, oh, no, not that. Another reaction to change can be, oh, shit, more stuff to put on my to-do list. Another reaction to change, which is not all that common, is very interesting. What's happening? What can we do? What is opening up? And these are examples of being triggered to different reactions, different moods, and different conversations. What we're exploring today with these four practices for dealing with teams is we're exploring what goes on for human beings. As Maribel said, it's all human beings. And amazingly, so much of what is written and discussed and presented about business and leadership is a model and this, that, and abstractions, and somehow the human being gets left out. So can we have an agreement here that when we talk about teams facing change, we're talking about human beings? Please? Yeah? Okay. Fantastic. Then what we're going to do to help the team face change may be a little bit of a premature question, because we just agreed it's human beings. Do we know what a human being is? Because if we don't know what a human being is, we can make up our stories about here's what we need to do, assuming we know. And what we've found in our over 40 years of exploring leadership and leadership development and making it pragmatic in the hands of leaders and the performance of teams and companies is we tend to fall into a cultural common sense of making action mechanical. Well, you just do this and then you get the result. But that's not how it works for human beings. To get to the point of doing, you have to have the right perspective. You have to have competence. You have to have confidence. You have to have readiness to deal with the variability of the situation. And most difficult of all, you have to deal with other people. So many leaders have this problem that they say, my business would really be performing well if I didn't have to deal with people. People are the problem. If they would just do and we try to make people into the ATM. Give me, or the vending machine. So we're not going to do that today. I'm not going to give you a formula that's good for machines. And if we're going to be a leader or a coach to leaders, very interesting, the leaders and the coaches to leaders need to share an understanding of the space called leadership. They have different roles, but they need to understand this space called leadership. And leadership is also a space of human beings. So we're going to explore this question seriously. What is a human being? How does it show up in leadership? How does it show up in action? And guess how we get to verify our understanding of the human being? Through your experience. I assume everybody here is a human being. If someone is here that is not a human being, raise your hand. I want to have a conversation with you. Okay. No, okay. We can have a human conversation. And so I'm going to begin. Let me share an image with you. I'm going to begin with an image here that's about human beings. Do you notice this guy is a human being? And one of the things we've discovered about human beings is that we have blind spots. A blind spot is an area in the world or in life that we don't see. It doesn't show up. We are not aware. We're not aware of what to pay attention to. And so we're not very effective in action when we're blind. And blindness means that because we're not aware, it doesn't exist for us and we don't have a choice. So what we have found is that the cultural common sense about leadership, because it's in the wrong direction of machines and actions and models, and not including the full human being, it's a blind spot. Let me share with you, oh my gosh, there it is. So I've recently been doing research, and we found quantitative studies about leadership. And one was done by the head of research of a company called Linkage that big consulting company with big companies in the US. And they did a study of high potential leaders. And they did a 360 assessment of all these high potential leaders. And they asked three basic questions. They said, is this person good for people? Do you think leaders should be good for people or bad for people? Yeah? So we have a criteria here. We think they should be good for people. Second question, is this person good for culture? Do you think leaders should be good for culture? Produce a good culture or not? Yeah, we probably want that too. Number three, is this person good for business? That they know how to produce results. So the unity of the questions is you're dealing with human beings, you're good for people, you create a culture that supports human beings producing results, and it produces good results in business. What did they find in their research? They found that in this group of high potentials, only 9% were assessed as effective in these three areas. And I contacted the author of the research and said, oh my God, that's such a horrible. He said, yeah, that's actually pretty good. Other research has lower numbers. They don't work with high potentials. And we've seen studies that are as low as 2.5% of leaders are considered effective. This is amazing. This is amazing, and it's a symptom of a blind spot. I don't think we have bad people in leadership. We just don't know what leadership is. Leaders are not trained. And if you go to a profession, what constitutes a profession, what makes you a professional, is you can execute the standard practices of the profession, make a promise and fulfill it. When you go to see a physician, I don't think we want to find a physician that has only 9% success rate. And even if we have a chef, I don't think we want to go to a chef that has a 2.5% success rate of producing good meals. So this is amazing that the state of the world today is that we have many professions where people make and fulfill promises every day, but we accept this incredibly low standard of performance in leadership because we're not clear what it is. And so why am I talking about this blind spot? Because if we're going to have 4 practices to help teams in change, we need to have some appreciation of what are the criteria for being the effective leader to make those practices work. So with that, let me go back to share with you that if we're dealing with blindness, then we need to see. We need to illuminate. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to illuminate some of the blind spots around leadership and how we have learned to look at this phenomena is we first of all see human beings are observers. They see what they see. One of the mistakes of our culture is we both go out into the world and we see a car and we think we're seeing the same car. We're not. We're seeing what we have been taught to see. Somebody who's really into cars and really knows cars will have all kinds of details and assessments about the car. And the person who doesn't know much about cars will say, oh, there's this thing sitting there. This is a crucial part of being a professional, is you have to be able to see what's important. If you're an accountant, you have to see the world of finance. If you're a chef, you have to see the world of food and cooking. I don't see the same bodies that a physician sees. That's not my profession. And when I walk into a kitchen, I see cans and can openers. I'm not a chef. What does the leader have to see? What is the awareness of the leader that can be professional? When we see the right things, we also, in order to be a professional who can make and fulfill promises, we need to be able to take certain actions. Select those actions because we see them as needed and be competent at fulfilling them. And these actions produce results. But in order to take those actions, you have to have the body of the actor that is competent in those actions. So I'm providing this background because we need a little background on these 4 practices, on how we do them competently. So let me share one more aspect of this story, if you're with me so far. And hang on, as I am always in the dance to see who's in charge, my computer or me. And so I'm going to claim that I'm in charge right now until the computer tells me different. So here we are. Now we need to see. What do we need to see? What are the eyes of the leader? We're talking about times of change, and that conversation tends to be a conversation about the world and the future. Change, oh my God, what are we going to do? The future no longer looks like a repetition of the past, and I don't know what to do. That is the contraction that shows up. When we, in our own career, have learned to do something very well, but we've stayed inside what we know. We haven't learned to deal with what we don't know. We haven't learned to deal with the future and change. And that's not what I wanted. The computer won that round. What are the conversations that enable us to cope with the world? What are the conversations of the team? We call that the we space. But the we space only works with the help of leaders and professionals when you have the skills inside you, when you can actually do the right things. And giving you some instructions isn't enough. So I can tell you what to do, but that doesn't mean you know how to do it. I can tell you how to play the piano. That doesn't mean you're going to sit down and play the piano. I can tell you how to play tennis. That doesn't mean you need to experience it. You need to be in the practice. And so what we've learned is we need to start with me to learn how to interact with we as a leader and be able to create the future. And so I have a question for you. Aha, the computer gave you a peek to the next secret that is coming. But before we go there, we had in that last piece, we had world. What is the world for you? What is a world? What is the world of leadership? What is the world of a team? The world is not just stuff out there. The world is a worldview that we bring that hasn't made sense to us. And one of the things we've learned about the world is a place of life. And what is life? Life has two criteria for dealing with life and change. And we learned this from biology, from the biologist Umberto Maturana. And he explained that every living thing has to balance the choices of conservation with the choices of adaptation. When change comes, those living things that adapt survive. If you don't adapt, you die. And so if the tendency is to only conserve, only stay in what I know, only act from the past, we don't adapt. We're trapped in conservation. If we adapt too much and we don't conserve what is important, then we also have problems. And so leadership and coaching leaders and seeing the leadership world is about seeing what has to be conserved so we can go to the edge of adaptation to deal with change. And this is not simply concepts, this is in your body. Because your body can have these contraction reactions that will impact yourself as a leader. How are we doing so far? You with me? So I want you to see this conversation we're having about the 4 practices to help teams with change starts with you. How can you help a team cope with change if you don't know how to cope with change? If you don't have the body that can dance with change? If you don't know how to sustain aliveness through adaptation? And so that's part of the background here. And the conversations are helping the team learn this, but we learn it first with ourselves. One of the ways we have problems as leaders or teams with change is our world is too small. So what is your world? What is your future of your work? What is your world of being a professional? What is your world of being a leader? One habit people can fall into, we see this with our clients of our coaching and consulting all the time, is their world becomes defined by the past. And for some people, the world becomes defined by their job. If their job is threatened, their world is threatened because their world has become too small. So my first question for you is, in the world of work, are you bigger than your job? Do you know the conversations to be bigger than simply what the job demands? Are you connected with the world of your profession? Are you connected with possibilities? And another aspect of this skill, and again, we're leading up to helping our teams, is how do we deal with breakdowns? How do we deal with change? This is not extraordinary. This kind of change is going on all the time. It needs to become part of our basic competencies of how we deal with change, personally, with a team, with an organization, and with an offer in the world. We need to be able to dance with the changing situation, knowing what we're going to conserve. And what do we conserve? We conserve our capacity for choice. We conserve the value that we can offer. But value is not based on what we do or what we have learned to do. Value is taking care of the situation that's changing. And so the first step to being an effective leader with change is being bigger than your job and being in the framework that I have a job and I'm very good at it and I might even enjoy it. Hopefully you do. But I need to be in regular practices of reading the world, seeing the breakdowns, and using the breakdowns as edges for learning, not as places to avoid. So everybody take a deep breath. Really, take a deep breath. The deep breath is our most fundamental leadership practice. How can you deal with change if you're all tense and contracted? Because it contracts your body, it contracts your future, it puts you into fear. And so we need to be able to look at the world and say, something's happening. It could even be threatening. I don't like it. And we see a lot of that going on economically, politically, in the world, socially. And that is the world. That is the world we live in. That is the world where we need to thrive. And so we begin to be self-aware of our own habits of contraction, and we declare them as edges for learning. So that's the first key for ourselves. How big is your world? Are you cultivating a world of possibilities that's bigger than your job? That's part of being part of a profession. The second aspect that I've simply alluded to, I'm not to the practices yet, I'm still creating the context for us, is that as leaders and as human beings in life, I believe one of the challenges is to embrace it all. Embrace the light and the dark, the up and the down. When we run away from the problems and we only want to be the expert when it's easy, you won't be an effective leader. I learned this in my career when I was in Silicon Valley. That's when I first started with this work that we now call generative leadership. And I was in an organization that was floundering and failing. And I wound up being given the opportunity to lead a turnaround of an organization that had not been able to get a product out the door in 2.5 years. We changed the conversations, we changed the mood, we dealt with the situation where many people were leaving the company, and we wound up delivering all 35 products of the company with higher quality than had ever been achieved before in 6 months. That's when I began to learn, how do you deal with change? Not only the change that's coming at you, but how do you create change as a positive possibility? And so one more element of the observer we're creating here to talk about the 4 practices. And let me share what that's about. Da, 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 da. This is a perspective that allows us to think and talk about leadership and life, because it's about human beings. What goes on in action? What goes on when we face the world? What goes on when we're in our conversation of the future? How do we begin to understand what's happening for me and then with members of my team? We observe with multiple dimensions. The first dimension is, what are the bodies saying? We refer to that as somatics. Somatics is a word that means body and mind together. If you have some crazy story in your mind, you'll feel it in the body. If the body has a reaction of fear, you'll feel it in the mind. And so we need to become aware to create choices of, when we're facing change, what is the somatics of leadership? To be present, to be alert, and in a state that's ready to act. The E of our self stands for emotions, but also moods. Our emotions and moods are predispositions to action. There are emotions that open possibilities and emotions that close them. Ambition opens possibilities. Trust opens possibilities. Readiness opens possibilities. Fear closes them. Anger closes them. Resignation, overwhelm, anxiety closes them. And so the leader needs to be able to be aware of these and how they're showing up in a conversation, and be able to choose with your own presence and be aware of how to produce the mood that is opening the future, not closing it. Demonstrating possibility, not fear. L stands for language and stories. We live in language. That's part of being human. There is a part of language that is generative, which means it's generating action. It's generating perspective. It's actually generating our emotions and our body reactions as well. It generates what we see and what we don't see. And we live in our stories about life and change. So in terms of stories, what's your story about change? What's your mood about change? What's your body reaction to change? Because we tend to get pretty happy when we're in a place where we're fully competent and confident and can exercise some control. But the leader is at the edge of change all the time, either dealing with it or creating it. We call creating change entrepreneurship, innovation, or effective leadership. The P stands for practice. What we practice is what we become. what we practice teaches our body how it's going to react. What we practice teaches our emotions, the emotions we tend to fall into. What we practice is the stories and opinions that we live in. So this takes us back to the power of awareness. Are we aware of our patterns? Because if we're aware, we have choice. If we're not aware, we just drift in the pattern. What is the problem with a team facing change or you facing change? You have a pattern of contraction, body reactions, moods, and stories. One of the stories tends to be, I'm so small and the world is so big, there's nothing I can do. And yet, in the face of change, we can always take action. We can make new offers. We can open new conversations. We literally can change the future. And then H stands for history. Your history of your practice has produced these patterns of awareness, blindness, of behavior. And in order to develop leadership, we need to engage in practices that produce the somatics, emotions, and language of the leader, the observer and actor of the leader. And what we have learned in our generative leadership journey is these dimensions are not just for describing the way we are, they are places of choice. We can train our body and our leadership presence. We can deal with we can walk into the fire that is facing the team with calmness and readiness for action. We can learn how to shift emotions, learn when we're getting into a negative emotion. We can learn to change our story. And changing stories is not a shallow act because we live in our stories. Our stories live us. So with that, I'm hoping that you're seeing a different view here of the world of the leader and the world of the team. And so the leader is a human being, the team members are a human being, they live in conversations, and in those conversations, all those dimensions are being touched. What has changed for the team? Is it a source of contraction? Is it a source of fear? Is it a force? What are some reactions to change that people have? Sometimes they get lost in uncertainty and fear from that uncertainty. Sometimes they go into waiting. Oh, I'm going to wait until things go back to the way they were. In many places in our world today, I don't think things are ever going to go back to the way they were. We need to go in a different direction to create the possibilities. One way that people can react is we are a victim of the situation. There's nothing we can do, and we just keep our head down and hope to survive. But the leadership perspective is we're going to face change. We're going to understand change. We're going to become part of the change and create a new place for a new future for us. So with that, we're ready to talk about the 4 practices that allow us to actually engage with our teams around how do we do that. Let me share with you that when I first started working with these generative distinctions in my Silicon Valley days, I had to face a situation in my company where the marketplace was shifting and our company was failing, was falling behind. I had to face a situation where the company was having layoffs and people were uncertain. So I faced these issues very early in my leadership career. And I had to decide, going to the me space, what was I going to do? How was I going to stand in the face of change? And how was I going to help my team? And so what I learned is that I had to be a generator of the future. I had to decide what was I going to stand for to generate a future with my team, rather than to be a commentator of the future and what was coming. So the first practice, and these are all conversational, so they're all something you can see and do. The first practice is to actually talk about the future, to actually talk about the uncertainty, to actually talk about the range of challenges and threats that are coming. Dealing with threat is actually one of the topics that is considered an essential part of strategy. You don't avoid threats. You look for them. You prepare for them. You are ready to change with them. And so the first place that you help the team is to face the future rather than be overwhelmed by it, triggered by it. Have an open and honest conversation. And in having that conversation, the skill of the leader is to be open and honest with not only what's going on with people, but to be open and honest about the uncertainty. We're facing change. We have to combine what we're going to conserve and how we're going to adapt, because we have those choices. And sitting here like a deer in the headlights is not an effective success strategy. So what are we going to do? And you don't have to have the answer. You don't let the team say, give me the answer, boss. You say, I don't know either. But what we can do is be prepared for the possibilities. We can learn in this time of a challenge for adaptation to innovate and create success. One thing you will notice if you are looking for it is when times are difficult economically, some companies do very, very well. And some companies prepare in the downturn and come out of the downturn when the economy changes, because it always does. And we need to have that possibility for ourselves. It's a time for learning, for looking, and for design. Second practice. As part of the conversation of being open and honest about the future, the changes, the possibilities, we need to not only say, but demonstrate our capacity as human beings to have choice in the middle of a challenge. That means we need to take a stand. We need to make a commitment and act out of it, that we can change the future. And so what did I do when I was facing this in my Silicon Valley days, when people were leaving the company? I said, I'm staying. I see we have a challenging market. I see we have challenges in the market, but I also see that we have extraordinary assets in our company. And I wasn't making up stories. I was giving a true result of my reflection on the situation and say, I think we have a chance to win in the marketplace, because that's what we do as a product development organization. And I'm going to stay here and be committed to producing that and learning from the breakdown. And if you stay with me, that's what we will do. And we will continue our conversation of what we're learning, what's happening, and how we're going to develop our path into the future. It was personal. It was not about the team. It was about me, and then inviting the team to join with me. And what we found is over the years in generative leadership, we found there are actually many ways to deal with change and uncertainty. One of the practices and pieces of writing that we've done in the Institute is a paper on the power of not knowing. And this is a key skill for us as professionals and as leaders. Not knowing something does not mean that you can't act. It does not disempower you. Because if you look around, you don't know 99.999% of everything that's going on anyway. We have so many ways to create action and power and results when we don't know. Look at all the possible actions we can take. We can learn, we can get help, we can do design, we can do prototypes, we can do experiments, we can plan, on and on and on. But the mood has to be, there's something new and we're going to learn and go forward. We also found a fellow named Dave Snowden developed a framework called Cambian, in which he was a researcher at IBM originally. He has his own company now on complexity. And he provides these perspectives. There are problems that are known and the solutions are known. That's where we're all comfortable. But then there's the category of problems that are knowable. We haven't seen them before. We don't have solutions, but we know the approaches to develop the solution. Then we're confident. But then he gets into interesting territory. He goes to complexity. He said, the situation has changed. It's so complex and it's so different from the past. We don't know what to do. What do? Put your head down and wait? He said, no, you experiment. You do a lot of experiments to see what's going on and say, well, if I do this, what happens? If I do that, what happens? There is actually a practice for dealing with complexity. And then he had to face the ultimate challenge that he called chaos. It's not only complex, but it's changing so fast that experiments won't work. It's going crazy. What do you do then? He said, oh, there's a very clear strategy for how to deal with chaos. You go back to the conservation adaptation perspective and say, what are going to be the problems and the needs and the values that are going to persist no matter what? People are still going to need to eat. They're still going to have to work. They're still going to have work, and they still have to solve their problems. And he said, you go and produce an oasis of stability while you wait for the chaos, but not in the mood of waiting, but in the mood of creating. And then wait to go. Chaos always unfolds into complexity. So I'm going to take a deep breath. That was a lot. I hope you could follow the logic. The point is not that I'm wanting to teach you those distinctions, because we could take multiple webinars to do that. The point is, there are ways to learn how to deal with the unknown. There are ways to learn how to deal with uncertainty. Third conversation. You need to create a game. What is the game that we're going to play, team, to adapt? What is the game we're going to play to succeed? What is the game we're going to play to learn? What is the game that has us come out of the period of adaptation or change stronger than when we went in? And that is a conversation that I had with my team in my Silicon Valley days. And we began to see that conversation producing new focus on what's possible rather than only the threats. And then the fourth conversation again is the me to we, to saying, what are our shared, what is it we're going to share? What is it that we're going to share about what we care about, what we're committed to, what our standards are, what our roles are, so that we can play this game? And then what do we have? We have a project of creating the future instead of being a victim of it. So that has a spirit that comes from that second conversation. We can act. We're not a victim. So I want to share one more story and then ask Mary Bell to fill in all the blanks that I've left with this conversation so far. And I'm a student of some of the stories of ancient Chinese wisdom. And I respect that tradition because it's 5,000 years old and it has been manifested in many positive ways. And I'm fascinated with their stories. Let me tell you the story that they tell. It actually is part of Chinese medicine. The story that they tell of where you start in action. What is the part of your energy and your body that has to start in action? They actually associate this story with a point on your foot. That's interesting. If you're going to be in action, you're going to go somewhere, and where your foot is pointing is important. And so they have a name for this starting point. And the first name is great. You're going to be great. And the symbol for great is the symbol of a human being. It has a strong slash down the middle and shows two arms. And it's that symbol of connecting in a vertical way. And in the Chinese wisdom, the mission of the human being is to connect heaven, which is the world of possibility, and earth, which is the world of manifestation. I think that speaks to leadership. We connect possibility and manifestation through action. And bringing possibilities into reality always gets messy. That's part of our profession. But the second character that they have describing this starting point of being great is described and translated as the image of a lamb. Lambs were animals that were used in sacrifice in that tradition. And it's a lamb being beaten without protest. Amazing. I've had to spend a lot of time understanding what that image means because it goes together. You're great standing in the world, but the world is beating on you. That's part of life. And the response is you don't protest. In other words, you don't make it a drama. You don't make it a reaction. You don't let the beating take your attention and your energy and have it be all about that. You stay great at the same time. And I think that's a beautiful story for what the challenge is in facing change and being a leader is to sustain your spine, your stand in the world, and stay great, even though life is beating on you. So with that, I want to open up for some conversation. I'll start with Mary Bell if she has a comment or contribution to make here.
Cuando estuvimos conversando con Bob acerca de esta videoconferencia, mejor dicho, voy a empezar de otra manera. Cuando estuvimos pensando sobre esta videoconferencia, nosotros pensábamos cuáles son esas prácticas del liderazgo generativo que ven nuestros alumnos en el CCG1, en el CCG2, en el CCG3, que pueden ayudar a los líderes en este momento de movimiento. Yo tengo este conflicto acerca de cómo se siente la gente, porque la gente se está contrayendo, las organizaciones se están contrayendo, pero realmente no hay contracción. Las organizaciones se están moviendo, ya sea porque están trayendo gente, moviendo las estructuras, reorganizando las empresas o porque están sacando gente. Y esa sensación de contracción no existe. Realmente las organizaciones están siempre en movimiento. Ellas se están moviendo todo el tiempo. Y cuando hablamos de que las organizaciones se están moviendo, realmente los que nos estamos moviendo somos los seres humanos que estamos allá adentro. Y como estaba diciendo Bob, a través de su contexto, contándonos sobre el self, mi pregunta es, quienes generamos la inestabilidad, quienes generamos la contracción, quienes generamos las dificultades, quienes generamos las faltas de conversaciones, somos estos seres humanos que creamos las organizaciones y quienes estamos alrededor de las organizaciones como stakeholders de las organizaciones, bien sea las organizaciones como empresas o las organizaciones como los estados, los estados. El tema de hoy en día está generado por el tema en Latinoamérica, sobre todo por el tema político, por el tema social, y eso genera un tema económico. Y siempre me pregunto, ¿cuál es la posición y cuál es la conversación en la que yo debo estar para no contraerme, sino estar abierta a las conversaciones y a poner nuevas conversaciones en mis empresas o con mis clientes, en el mundo social y en el mundo en donde estoy? Porque cuando empieza la contracción, la contracción evita la conversación y me evita la sensación de sentir yo también soy parte de esta organización, y me evita el sentir que yo tengo la posibilidad de crear y abrir estas conversaciones, de pedir que se abran abiertamente estas conversaciones y de generar posibilidades. Entonces, con la explicación que Bob hacía de el pie que va hacia el lado, great, pero el lamp que está siendo golpeado, siento que nos sentimos más como el animalito golpeado, la ovejita golpeada, que realmente con cuál es esa parte de great que yo puedo hacer para generar las conversaciones. Entonces, este es un espacio, cuando nosotros hablamos del liderazgo generativo, es un espacio siempre de reflexión, de apertura, de mirar posibilidades. De hecho, nuestro logo dice el poder de lo posible. Y cuando hablábamos con Bob de las 4 prácticas, si ustedes se dan cuenta, las 4 prácticas son conversaciones. Son conversaciones. O sea, no son prácticas, no son prácticas que ningún ser humano no pueda poner. Entonces, mi pensamiento sobre esto es, ¿cuáles son esas restricciones también que nosotros nos ponemos al poder tener esas conversaciones? Y pienso en muchos de mis líderes, muchos de los líderes que hablan conmigo acerca de, es que yo no puedo divulgar esta información de el cambio, la reorganización que se está haciendo al interior de la empresa porque todavía no está definido. Y siempre me pregunto, ¿por qué dejar la conversación pendiente y no pensar lo que puede ocasionar la conversación pendiente? ¿Por qué no hablar del futuro? ¿Por qué no hablar de las conversaciones? ¿Por qué no hablar de los estados de ánimo? ¿Y por qué no hablar de qué es esto que estamos creando, construyendo juntos? Entonces, solamente quería completar eso, Bob, porque algunos de los que están aquí, además de ser coaches y consultores que acompañan a los líderes en las organizaciones, son líderes, son los líderes que están en las organizaciones. Y mi pregunta siempre es, ¿cómo poder abrir esas conversaciones si no tengo autorización de abrir esas conversaciones por el nivel de poder y autoridad que tengo en la organización? ¿Cómo logro pedir a las personas que tienen esa autoridad que abran esas conversaciones y que no dejen que las personas se enteren en último momento de lo que está pasando? No solamente por la cultura de silencio que se genera y de voy a decir como chisme o malestar emocional que se genera, sino adicionalmente porque podríamos, como dice Bob, tener toda la conversación de recursividad, toda la conversación de posibilidades que puede traer la organización completa. Como ha pasado en muchas organizaciones que han generado conversaciones abiertas y públicas con sus públicos internos y sus clientes internos para poder saber cómo sostener la conversación. Y mi último comentario aquí, que para mí es fundamental y como dice Bob, el producto de un líder es su equipo. Y para mí ese producto necesita 3 características fundamentales. Una es la dignidad y la integridad del equipo y de cada una de las personas que está allí. El segundo es la posibilidad de que sientan pertenencia. Y el tercero es que se sientan seguros. Y abrir conversaciones, sostener conversaciones y poder estar en un momento de conversación constante es lo que le permite al equipo sentir eso, sentir que estoy siendo visto, que estoy siendo tenido en cuenta, que no se me está ocultando información, pero adicionalmente que puedo tener la seguridad de que lo que está pasando es que voy a crear mi futuro de una manera o de otra. Eso me hace sentir pertenencia y eso hace que mi equipo, yo como líder, logre que mi equipo se sostenga, se sienta en la capacidad de seguir conversando y se sienta adicionalmente en la capacidad de seguir construyendo ese futuro. Así que eso era simplemente lo que quería completar, pero me encantaría escucharlos a ustedes. ¿Qué están viviendo? ¿Qué está pasando? ¿Qué sienten sobre estas 4 prácticas? Nada, eso era esta es como la invitación a que entremos en conversación. No sé, Bob, si quieres completar algo.
No, I would love to have some questions or reflections that we can explore together, or what's happening for you. You know, we started with how do you manage change yourself, and then how do you manage change with your team? And, you know, what do you see that's clear, or what is the edge of challenge that you find in your situation? So who'd like to share or bring a question? And we can explore it together. This is always the leadership moment. Who's going to speak and move the conversation forward? So and these are the moments where I think I really did a good job. Nobody has any questions, or I say, no, I did a terrible job there. But that's me dealing with contraction. Gloria.
Ok, Bob, gracias Maribel. Voy a poner un poquito la conversación en el universo que yo siempre exploro, que es el de las familias, intentando poner lo que más se me mueve a mí cuando hablamos de las familias como equipos, porque vemos las familias como equipos también. Entonces ahí lo que siempre me pasa a mí con las familias y en el trabajo que hago con ellas, tiene que ver sobre todo con parte de lo que hablaba Maribel ahora de la autoridad. Cada vez que una familia vive un cambio, cada vez que una familia está en un momento difícil o de crisis, claramente no son todos los miembros los que pueden participar de la misma manera que lo ponía ahorita Mari. Y no es porque yo, el papá, tenga a alguien encima o yo, la mamá, tenga a alguien encima que me diga que no lo haga. Es porque las personitas que yo juzgo, que tengo abajo, mis hijos chiquitos o los adolescentes, parecieran no tener autoridad para participar. Entonces, mi conversación siempre va alrededor de eso. ¿Cómo lograr poner estas conversaciones y cómo tener cómo poner en práctica las 4 prácticas, perdón la redundancia, teniéndolos en cuenta a todos, ¿sí? Siempre es la búsqueda que tengo al interior de las familias. Entonces, la conversación me ha tenido ahí dando vueltas por una familia en particular, pero creo que es bonito ponerlo también desde ahí, ver cómo los distintos niveles que juzgamos que tenemos unos con otros nos aleja de la posibilidad de movernos mejor en el cambio, solamente porque no tenemos, o sí, el input de todas las personas que participan del equipo. Eso es lo que quería traer mientras se activaba un poquito más la conversación.
Yeah, beautiful. So, first of all, let's clarify what is a team and what is a family, because they're different. There is a part of family that operates like a team, but team is a distinction in the world of action. are we coordinating action to produce a result that we have shared care about? And the family does that. Sometimes they're acting as a team. But the relationships and roles on a team, if you're out in the workplace, has to do with the promises you make in the game of action. That's your identity. That's what you're there for. That's how you're assessed. That's what your authority is. That's your value. But in the family, the roles are not that. You are not simply the actions you produce and the promises you fulfill. You are in a relationship also of love and of connection that can never be broken. So there are other conversations, and part of the art of family is how do you combine all these aspects of relationship, of love, of learning, and action. And you've gone to what is fundamental to both team and family: conversation. And when Mary Bell said that integrity, belonging, and safety, these are the criteria for cultivating a space for openness and honest conversations. And in the conversation domain, the most important thing we can do in work or in family is listen. Authentically listen to what are the concerns, the cares, the reactions of this other human being, whether they're a child or not. You see, the child does not usually be given authority to make decisions, but they deserve to be listened to, or else they're learning they don't deserve to be listened to. And the same thing is true with team members. They deserve to be listened to. There's a difference between making a decision, which sometimes is the end point of the conversation, and having the conversation that gets there. We don't need to argue the result from the beginning. We need to listen and then set up the structure for what is the standard for what decision is going to be made, what request is going to be made. But everybody should feel that's where the belonging comes. I was listened to. I was included. And the belonging cannot happen without safety. So you need to listen without threat, without agenda, being open to include this living being, this human being, is part of the world. And then we can talk about roles. We can talk about what we share, and our roles may already be defined in a way that we are organized for certain other conversations. But that is what's the essential. Umberto Maturana used to talk about conversations in this way, and when he talked about conversations with children, he said, why don't we listen to them? They deserve to be listened to. As biological beings, they need to feel connected and included without it already being shut down. And that's also part of the skill of the leader, is to authentically listen, knowing that there is a moment, a separate moment, where a choice has to be made or a decision has to be made. But the authentic listening is maybe the choice will shift based on what this team member or family member is bringing that I didn't know before. Conversations have that power. And so there's an authentic openness. Beautiful. Thank you. Mary Bell.
Yamile, perdóname, ya te doy la palabra, pero es que me gustaría complementar algo aquí. Me encanta la distinción que hace Bob acerca de estar en la conversación y tomar decisiones acerca de. Y para mí creo que es muy importante al interior de las empresas que las conversaciones se vayan teniendo y se vayan contando. La gente no está pidiendo que le dejen decidir. La gente está pidiendo que le dejen saber lo que está pasando en la mayoría de las veces. Y en las familias yo creo que es igual. Yo sé que las personas que están a nivel de autoridad son las que van a tomar la decisión, pero como dice Bob, me gustaría que me contaran y me gustaría que que sostuvieran la conversación conmigo y ser escuchados. Lo que, por ejemplo, no sé si ustedes saben, pero yo vivo aquí en el Silicon Valley y que aquí en el Silicon Valley en los últimos 4 meses se han hecho 250.000 layoffs, o sea, 250.000 personas han salido de sus trabajos y se ve la diferencia de comunicación entre una organización que le importa a su gente y una organización a la que no le importa a la gente. La decisión es que la organización necesita sacar 250.000 personas, o 11.000 personas, o 20.000 personas, o 18.000 personas. Pero la diferencia está en cómo lo comunica, cómo cuenta del proceso, cómo le cuenta a su gente el proceso, el momento en el que se lo cuenta y el medio a través del cual la gente se entera. Es bien diferente que te enteres por un aviso de prensa o por un movimiento que se genera en las redes al estilo Twitter, donde tu jefe pone un tweet en las redes sociales y te dice, si no llegas mañana ya no tienes trabajo, ¿no? O sea, me encanta la sensación de que eso pase, ¿no? Que es claramente desagradable, nadie está siendo tratado como un humano, todo el mundo, nadie sabe lo que está pasando y adicionalmente la incertidumbre que queda a las personas que supuestamente aparecen el lunes es toda, ¿no? Nadie sabe que el miércoles o el jueves siguiente no va a mandar otro tweet y es como dice Gloria en el chat, es un ejemplo de la vida real. U otras organizaciones que se encargan de irle contando a la gente desde el comienzo, por ejemplo, mostrando por qué se va a tomar la decisión, mostrando las maneras como se van a tomar la decisión, dándole la posibilidad a algunas personas de que sean las que se retiran antes de hacer los planes finales de retiro y dando las opciones. Entonces, eso me parece que es interesante, es cómo se entera la gente, qué información le doy a la gente, cómo sostengo las conversaciones y cómo hago que la gente pueda no sentirse no solo la que se va, sino la que se queda o la que se reestructura, cómo se entera del tema. Y esto es súper importante para el líder y para el gobierno de la organización. Yamile.
Bueno, buenas noches, muchas gracias. Bueno, yo creo que diferente a lo que mencionabas, Maribel, de retiros masivos, hay organizaciones que por el contrario, para ellos es muy importante conservar a sus funcionarios y a su equipo. Pero desafortunadamente, post pandemia, el nivel de rotación en ciertas industrias y en ciertos sectores es desbordante. Entonces nos tiene a los líderes, digamos, con esa, ahorita pues el ideal, y yo estoy completamente de acuerdo y comparto todo lo que han mencionado, principalmente las 4 prácticas, lo que tú mencionabas de conversación, pero a veces uno siente como líder que no es suficiente porque la rotación no va en línea con todo lo que se ha venido trabajando. Entonces mi pregunta puntual es, a nivel de rotación que está agobiando a los líderes, como mencioné, ¿qué nos recomendarían como un plan de acción a corto, a mediano plazo, si puede existir, digamos, un plan de acción o una recomendación concreta? Es mi primera pregunta. Y la segunda, bueno, a nivel, digamos, de estas 4 prácticas, como mencioné, importante, pero también existen generaciones de líderes, que muy probablemente ciertas generaciones o ya están cerca a pensionarse y no están como tan conectados en posiblemente hacer estas 4 prácticas si uno dijera, venga como organización, quiero que usted haga parte. Entonces, ¿qué también nos ayuda a nosotros como líderes para atraer a esos líderes que ya ahorita están en ese nivel de pensionado o que pues están en ese, pues como en esa zona de confort y creen, o sea, y no ven necesario el cambio? Entonces, 2 preguntas puntuales, el tema de rotación, ¿qué nos recomiendan para los líderes en seguir mejorando? Y 2, en diferentes generaciones de líderes para que todos se conecten en la misma línea.
Beautiful, beautiful. Maribel, you want to go first or you want me to? Yeah. So thank you, Yamile. I love your bringing up that retention is a problem for some companies. It's called, in the media, it's called the big resignation. People are moving like crazy. And somehow they think this has something to do with the pandemic. And this has us go back to our question, what is a human being? What are human beings doing here? What is missing? What is going on? And let me give you a perspective that I think, yes, there can be a plan. Yes, there can be an approach to this that can be effective. Because in my story, when I had a lot of people leaving and said, we're going to create the future, people began to stay. And so many companies, when they become mature and they're making money and they're more like a machine, the leadership sometimes becomes administrative. They're not really leading anymore. They're just decision makers. And so the way they look at people is, well, we need workers, so we give them jobs and we give them benefits. And if they want something else, HR will worry about it. And that is the missing piece in the leadership repertoire. They don't include people. Everything that's going to happen for the organization of the company comes from the people. So they have to have a more generative perspective of people. Why do people stay? When surveys were made about why people leave, lack of income was like number 5 or 6 on the list. That is not the issue. Paying people more, people will not take more money to be in a toxic situation. I think what people are looking for, and that many organizations are not able to provide, is meaning. I don't want to just be a workhorse, trading my time. I want to have a life. I want to have meaning. And what can organizations offer that has to do with meaning? Learning. Because what is an organization? And what is a team? It's a group of people creating the future together. But if they're only told what the future is, if they're only made instruments for performance, they don't feel that they're learning. They don't feel that they're creating. And so what we find when we go out and read about good leaders, they tend to inspire their people. The people are allowed to be engaged. And if you go back to the employee disengagement example I gave from the Gallup people, remember that 10 of the 12 criteria were conversations. And those conversations are the responsibility of leadership. And so what's missing is conversations that connect to people's care, to produce an impact in their life, not just their paycheck and not just their career. I believe that's more that is more an issue now because people have been through a phase of facing life and death with the pandemic. They're more concerned about living. That's my story. How does that land for you?
Sí, interesante porque de una u otra manera es rescatar ese ser y no verlo como mecanismo, ¿verdad? Pues solo de trabajo y separar el tema o buscar ese equilibrio, velar por el equilibrio vida-trabajo, pero completamente válido. Muchas gracias.
Let me comment, Mary Belt, on the second question she had, and then have you join in. This question of how do you deal with the old leaders who are waiting to retire? That's what I heard. And this is not uncommon. And often the question is, how do we change the leaders? I would say usually you won't, because it has its own culture at the top of the organization. But that doesn't mean you can't have vibrant teams and team conversations inside the organization. The issue is waiting for the leader to provide it. And what I learned in my Silicon Valley experience was Don't wait for the leader. Become the leader. Do it where you are. And so if there are leaders maybe lower in the organization who want to have a bigger impact, I found that when I was leading my team, I didn't have the senior leaders coming in to be culture police. I led the team the way I led the team, and I learned to have conversation, and we had a great team in an organization that was failing. And then we became the example for what was possible for the team. So that's the first strategy, I think, that doesn't require any permission or outside. The other way that I would approach senior leaders who are concerned about succession planning is to say, who cares about succession planning? Who cares about the company after we leave? And you will find some senior leaders do. And those are the ones who will be interested in the conversation of how their leadership can make a difference. Because the shape they leave the company in and its prospects is part of their legacy. And those are the two places that I would make a suggestion that are places we can take action. Maribel.
Bob, gracias. Yamile, me encantan tus dos preguntas porque yo creo que tus dos preguntas se responden alrededor de cuál es el valor que la organización genera para sus clientes internos. Y me encantan las respuestas que te trae Bob, porque te podríamos dar cientos de estadísticas acerca de lo que los empleados sienten sobre sus organizaciones y las organizaciones no escuchan, ¿no? Entonces, por ejemplo, mucha gente, un ejemplo pequeño, después de la pandemia o durante la pandemia, la gente duró 2 años de pandemia organizando sus vidas para quedarse en sus casas, ¿no? Para vivir en sus casas y para hacer trabajo remoto. Entendimos que el trabajo remoto ayudaba no solamente a las organizaciones, sino a la familia, inclusive a las ciudades, a la movilidad, a muchos factores que están siendo difíciles en las ciudades. O sea, Bogotá es una ciudad donde desplazarte de tu trabajo a tu casa te puedes demorar fácilmente 1:30, 2 horas, ¿no? Entonces, cuando empezamos a decirle a la gente, bueno, vamos a empezar a volver al trabajo, a la normalidad, que para mí la normalidad no existirá nunca, les decimos, listo, todos otra vez a las oficinas. No, pero venga, ¿por qué necesitamos ir todos otra vez a las oficinas? ¿Por qué no hacemos diferentes métodos para poder hacerlo? No, entonces te vas a dar cuenta igual cuál es la perspectiva de cada una de las organizaciones. Hay organizaciones que dicen, listo, todo el mundo para las oficinas. Y ahí empiezan a perder gente. Otros dicen, vamos a hacer un híbrido. Y ahí tienes sostenimiento sobre lo que las personas están buscando. Pero adicionalmente tiene que ver también con el valor que ellos sienten que generan y que la organización les genera. Las organizaciones han tenido hasta el momento esta conversación, como les decía Bob, de yo te doy trabajo, yo te doy plata, yo te doy sostenimiento. Y la gente está empezando a pensar en, no, ¿sabes qué? No es lo único que me generas. Yo soy quien te estoy generando sostenimiento, yo soy quien estoy generando movilidad, yo soy quien está generando o ayudando a generar el engranaje de la organización. Entonces, las organizaciones necesitan dejar de pensar en sus empleados como empleados y mirarlos como clientes internos, donde realmente necesitan empezar a tener una conversación con cómo retengo al mejor personal, escuchando, preguntando, cómo les genero valor más allá del sueldo o más allá de tener un trabajo. Y en cosas tan sencillas como eso que te estaba diciendo de si trabajamos por internet o trabajamos en las oficinas. Hay otro punto que es súper importante y están los dos temas de los que hablabas. Para mí hay un tema grande al interior de lo que es el liderazgo hoy en día, y es que las personas están empezando a no querer solamente gestionar, y hacer que las cosas pasen, sino que quieren también entrar en el mundo de el propósito, entrar en el momento del legado, de la razón de ser de lo que hacen, de la inspiración. Entonces, el modelo de liderazgo también está cambiando. Entonces, si antes eran los jefes que controlaban, después se convirtieron en los gerentes que gestionaban y que hacían que las cosas pasaran, hoy en día todas las personas en la organización están esperando que sí, que las cosas pasen, que se den resultados, pero que también haya líderes inspiradores que sepan cómo gestionar seres humanos. Por aquí Edward decía en el chat, no solamente tener líderes, buena gente, sino líderes preparados que estén dispuestos a conversar con la gente y a saber cómo poder mover a la gente hacia donde la gente necesita ir. Para mí son más facilitadores del trabajo de su gente que ordenadores y gestionadores de resultados. Y con respecto a lo que hablas de los líderes que están esperando jubilarse, hay una conversación súper bonita que les traeré también a Bob para que la hagamos, y es ¿cuáles son las preguntas que se están haciendo los seres humanos en cada momento de su vida? Porque una persona que está a punto de jubilarse, que está más o menos entre los 55, 60, por ejemplo en Colombia, o 62, 55 y 62, está pensando en muchas cosas. Está pensando en qué voy a hacer con todo este conocimiento. El liderazgo que yo hice o el trabajo que yo hice, ¿valió la pena o no? ¿Cuál es el legado que estoy dejando? Entonces, hablábamos con Bob acerca de las diferentes preguntas que tiene Erik Erikson en los momentos de la vida y que esos momentos de la vida determinan también cuál es la conversación que la organización puede tener con un empleado que está a punto de retirarse e inspirarlo y motivarlo a que venga y se convierta en un gestor de conocimiento y en un gestor de trabajar con otras generaciones. Hay una película muy hollywoodense y muy bonita que se llama The Intern, El Interno, con Robert De Niro y con Anne Hathaway. Y podrá ser muy hollywoodense, pero tiene una conversación interesante acerca de qué traen las personas que han vivido 5, 10, 20, 30, 35, 40 años de experiencia en las organizaciones y qué traen esas personas para conservar, para comunicar y para gestionar al interior de la organización, ¿no? Entonces, creo que también puede ser un tema de cómo la organización genera valor y cómo escucha.
Muchas
Miguel,
gracias, María.
a ti, Camila. Nos queda un minuto, Miguel. Pero dale.
¿Alcanzo? Bien, gracias. Hola Bob, hola Maribel, siempre es un gusto escucharlos. Quería preguntarles, ¿cómo hacemos nosotros para comprometer a los miembros de un equipo, aquellos miembros del equipo que no están de acuerdo con las decisiones que se toman, ¿no? Primero, la primera pregunta sería, ¿es posible hacerlo? ¿Es posible comprometerlos a pesar de que no crean en las decisiones que se toman o que no estén de acuerdo con ellas? Y lo segundo es,
Yeah.
¿cómo podemos mirar y qué diferencia hay emocionalmente entre el cumplimiento y el compromiso? ¿Cómo podemos distinguir esos dos lugares en ellos, ¿no? Gracias.
Very good. So, first of all, this gets, Miguel, this is a very important question because it gets down to the heart of what is a team. And for a team to be effective, it cannot be a group of people who agree or disagree and consensus is the only way to move, because that produces conflict, that produces constriction. So when the coach is running the soccer game and says, I want you to play this strategy, and one of the team members said, no, I don't agree, and goes and plays their own game, it doesn't work for the team because we're not acting together. And so what does the coach do? The player is off the field. because everybody has to be playing the same game. And so part of being a professional member of a team, I found this an important conversation with my team, is when I was the team leader, I said, I'm going to make the final decision because that's my job. I am the person responsible for the promise of the team. What I will give everyone on the team is a chance to offer their opinion. Unless we're in an emergency where we just need to move, I will allow people to offer their opinion. And I will have to make a decision. If there's disagreement, I will make a decision because that's my job. To be on a member of the team, once a decision is made, you need to act like it was your choice. Otherwise, you're not on the team. You're the player on the soccer field running around doing the wrong thing. So this has to do with what it means to be a team member, is you get to have a voice, but you don't get to be the anti-decision maker. And if you don't agree so much with the decisions of the team, then you need to leave the team because otherwise you are a problem. And so this needs to be an honest conversation. I used to have this conversation with my team. You will get the chance to argue. If I don't choose your recommendation, you need to say to yourself, I didn't make the sale. I didn't make the argument because as the team leader, I have other concerns, other conversations I'm in that you are not in that have me hopefully have the bigger perspective. But regardless of that, I am the responsible one for the team. That is how we deal with what is being on the team. When in sports, the play is called, you act on behalf of the play. But then at halftime, you could offer comments. In the week preparing for the next match, you could have conversations, but not in the flow of action, or else you don't have a team, you have a mess. Does that make sense?
Totalmente. Sí. Muchas
Yeah.
gracias. Sí.
And so this is a very courageous conversation by the leader to actually see what does and does not work and what it means to be on the team. This is counter to some cultures where this is going to be a shock. But those cultures are usually ones that have a lot of problems because they haven't learned to align people. You know, the feeling of commitment and fulfillment is to notice in your own body and then to point it out to the team. When you make an agreement and the team, a decision has been made, I used to ask every team member, do you commit? And everybody would, and you could feel it in the body. And finally, when people learn, yes, I commit, even though I may have disagreed. Good, we can now play the game. You can feel it. And then when you have a completion, a fulfillment, have a moment of celebration. One of the problems in organizations, they don't celebrate enough. And I don't mean by having parties. I mean by having the moment where we say, yes, let's enjoy the completion. And so we can learn those feelings by pointing them out when they happen and also point out when they're not happening. And that way we, as a team, we begin to learn how to embody the game and come to alignment and understand what a team is and what a team is not, so that we can get better at that. Okay, thank you so much. Good questions. Maribel.
Se nos fue el tiempo.
Sí. Yes, thank you.
Bueno, o sea, nosotros si tienen más preguntas, como siempre, Bob siempre es amplio y abierto con el tiempo, pero también nos gusta ser respetuosos del tiempo de ustedes. Y aquí vamos a estar todos los miércoles de liderazgo, como saben, Perú, Colombia, 5:30. hablando de liderazgo generativo, hablando de cuáles son esos temas que necesitamos construir y desde los cuales necesitamos hacer conciencia sobre el tema de seguir siendo seres humanos, de tener conversaciones, de sostener conversaciones. Todas estas conversaciones para nosotros desde el liderazgo generativo son prácticas. Y como ya lo están viendo, la conversación que no se practica es una conversación que no existe. Y se convierte en una conversación faltante. Y desde esa conversación faltante se convierte en un quiebre para la organización. Así que, nada, vamos a seguir conversando. Todas estas conversaciones y estas prácticas son parte de las prácticas que aprendemos como alumnos de Bob en el programa de coaching y consultoría generativa. Tenemos las inscripciones abiertas. A partir de abril 13 comienza el CCG del primer año y en mayo el CCG del segundo año. Gloria les va a dejar los links sobre el programa para que lo puedan conocer, lo puedan ver con mayor profundidad. Y también queremos invitarlos, el próximo 3 de marzo vamos a tener un taller con Bob de 4 horas para contarles cómo es la dinámica del programa de coaching y consultoría, qué es lo que pasa, cuáles son las conversaciones que tenemos, cuál es la historia que aprendemos a desarrollar como líderes generativos y como coaches y consultores dentro de esta hermosa disciplina que Bob nos ha traído y que nos ha ayudado a construir y que, como se dan cuenta, sigue alimentando cada vez más a través de las conversaciones que tenemos con los alumnos, las conversaciones que tenemos con otros pensadores y las conversaciones que tenemos en el día a día en las organizaciones. Así que los invito al CCG por un día. Los invito también a aquellos que son coaches, consultores y líderes que están interesados en el programa a que tengan una entrevista, a contarles qué es lo que hacemos en el CCG y cómo puede cambiar sus vidas de verdad, de verdad, de verdad. Bob, como siempre, muchas gracias por estar con nosotros, por seguirnos, por seguir siendo nuestro maestro en esto del tema del liderazgo generativo y de cómo construir el futuro que queremos. Beita, gracias por tu voz. Hoy te hicimos correr varios en la traducción. Te pedimos disculpas. Y a todos ustedes los invito para que nos veamos dentro de 8 días en nuestros miércoles de liderazgo. Bueno, muchas gracias a todos y nos vemos dentro de 8 días.
Muchas gracias.